Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, it's another jersey time, a story time of some sort, how the Leafs drafted William Nylander. Because it really wasn't as simple as Dave Nonis, the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time, how far we've come, just walking up to the podium and saying, with the 8th overall selection in the 2014 entry draft, we select William Nylander. There's a story with a lot of context behind it on how the Maple Leafs were in that position to even draft number 88 or number 29 or number 39 or even number 62, 8th overall in 2014. If he changes his number one more time, we riot. Actually, if you have a number 39 or a number 62 William Nylander jersey, you have Lou Lamoriello to thank for that. And I mean, yeah, rookies don't normally get to choose their numbers, but Lou, for the sake of the fans, the 8th overall pick should be allowed to pick his number, whether he ended up settling on 29 and then changing it to 88 later on, or just straight up pick an 88. Let the guy who the fans want to buy their jersey of pick his number. So if you have a 62 or a number 39 William Nylander jersey, Lou Lamoriello owes you some money. Our story begins May 13th or May 14th, whenever the hell it was. That's not the important context here. 2013 TD Gardens, the Toronto Maple Leafs lose Game 7 to the Boston Bruins. Trust me, hear me out, this is where the story starts. James Reimer posted a .924 save percentage in the 12-13 season and later went on to post a .923 in those same playoffs. The Maple Leafs went into Game 5 of that series down 3-1 to the Boston Bruins in Boston, and James Reimer absolutely stood on his head like a madman, stopping 43 of 44 shots in that game, and then followed it up with a Game 6 performance in Toronto with 29 saves on 30 shots to send them to a Game 7. He was the only reason why they were in the playoffs to begin with, because Randy Carlyle, Toronto Maple Leaf teams just got outshot every single night, and he posted that .924 in the regular season and was an absolute angel, okay? I have an affinity for James Reimer and stuff like that, and maybe that's something that we haven't gotten into on this channel yet, but the guy was an absolute savior that season. But we all know how that Game 7 would eventually end. With about a minute 20 left in the third period, the Boston Bruins would score, and then again about 20 to 30 seconds later, tying it at 4, and the Jack Edwards overtime call goes as followed. They ripped the dagger out of the hands of the Maple Leafs at their throats and killed the beast. The Boston Bruins have made a 4-goal comeback. Love him or hate him, that's a pretty sick overtime call. Dave Nonis would go on that offseason to have his famous 4 or 5 days, is what it's known to Leaf fans, by buying out Mikhail Grabovski, letting Clark MacArthur walk to a divisional rival, acquiring Dave Bolland in a trade, signing David Clarkson, locking up Tyler Bozak to a 4x4 contract extension, which I guess in hindsight didn't turn out to be that bad, but all those other moves, ugh. But he also acquired Jonathan Bernier from the LA Kings for Frat Sanity, Matt Fratton, Ben Scrivens, and a second-round pick. Jonathan Bernier, a former 11th overall pick by the LA Kings, was kind of stifled behind Jonathan Quick at the time, and they really couldn't afford his salary eventually, so they did deal him to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he did ended up posting a .922 save percentage in 55 games that season. So that means that James Reimer, the season after getting them to Game 7 the previous year, was dethroned as the starting goalie automatically. And I mean, to be fair, James Reimer didn't really have the best of seasons in the 13-14 year, posting a .911 save percentage, but could you imagine where the Toronto Maple Leafs would be this year with a goalie tandem that posted a .922 and a .911? It was a whole debacle. Randy Carlyle calling James Reimer just okay. Jonathan Bernier starting the Winter Classic that year against the Detroit Red Wings. It was very clear who the Maple Leafs favored. Dave Bolland only played about 5 seconds for the Toronto Maple Leafs before getting his Achilles tendon slashed, and Dave Clarkson was kind of non-existent for the Maple Leafs at this point. I did an entire Jersey Time episode on David Clarkson and how he and his contract changed the NHL forever. Check out that video. I'll link it at the top of the screen because these stories are kind of happening simultaneously. But still, Phil Kessel cemented himself in having his highest goal-scoring year as a Toronto Maple Leaf this season with 37. James Van Riemsdyk scored 30 goals and 61 points. Nazem Kadri cemented himself as a full-time player on this team after having having a really good year in the shortened year, but this was a full season for Nazem Kadri. Tyler Bozak, I believe, had his highest points per game as a Toronto Maple Leaf that year. Joffrey Lupul was kind of injured, but still scored 20 goals. Cody Franzen was emerging as possibly a defender that the Leafs could have leaned on for years. Dion Phaneuf was Dion Phaneuf, but he was still trucking along. Jake Gardner was looking like a full-time fixture here, and this was Morgan Riley's rookie year. All in all, when you're looking at stuff like this, and you're looking at the save percentages that they got from their goaltenders, how in the world did they finish in a position to draft William Nylander at 8th overall? Well, kids, you see, they finished 23rd in the standings that year, finishing 38, 36, and 8 with only 84 points, but that's not the tale of the 13-14 Maple Leafs. This is the tale of the 13-14 Maple Leafs, and where our story leads to a conclusion. March 13th, 2014, the Toronto Maple Leafs were 36, 24, and 8. That's right, 38, 36, and 8 was how they finished the season, but they were 36, 24, and 8 at the beginning or the middle of March that season, and then they went on to lose 12 of their next 14 games, not even any of those games in overtime, mind you, and they missed the playoffs. 93 was the number of points needed to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference that season, and it was accomplished by the Detroit Red Wings. The Maple Leafs finished 9 points behind them in the standings, but lost to the Red Wings twice in that 14-game stretch, so that means all they had to do to make the playoffs was win 3 or 4 games, including those 2 to the Red Wings, and they would have been fine. But no, they didn't. But they did end up going on to draft William Nylander. April 11th, 2014, the Maple Leafs officially announced the hiring of now President and CEO of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I believe that's what his title is, or Lieutenant Governor, whatever you want to call him. The man with the plan, the Shanna plan. Brendan Shanahan comes aboard at the end of that season. And considering the fact that Dave Nonis was fired almost exactly a year later to Brendan Shanahan being hired, there is no way that Dave Nonis made that William Nylander pick on his own. Alright, there's no way that the guy that helped Brian Burke build the Toronto Maple Leafs truculence teams a couple of years before that would have drafted the little Swede 8th overall. You know, Dave Morrison, I believe he's the director of scouting with the Toronto Maple Leafs right now. He's really the only one to have survived that whole scorched earth thing at the end of the 14-15 season. I believe that he would have had input on that. I believe that Brendan Shanahan would have had input on that. But just looking at the names that were available in the 2014 draft in and around William Nylander, Don Cherry was pulling hard for the Toronto Maple Leafs to draft Nick Ritchie here, and that would have been a complete catastrophe. Dylan Larkin was also a guy that the Maple Leafs were rumored to be looking at with the 8th overall pick, but did ended up going 15th overall to the Red Wings, and if you're looking at the two players there, kind of similar in terms of skill and value. So there you have it, folks. That is the story of how the Maple Leafs went on to draft William Nylander 8th overall in the 2014 entry draft. From the Game 7 loss to the Boston Bruins, to Jonathan Bernier and James Reimer, to the Winter Classic, to broken toasters, to Dave Nonis having his 4 or 5 days, to Brendan Shanahan being hired by the Toronto Maple Leafs. It was all part of the story. And if you're one of those people that still don't think that William Nylander is worth his $6.9 million contract, I mean, that's not what this video is really about, so this is why this is at the end here. But I don't think that there's anything really more that Nylander can do for you to help you in that department. I think that you're just lost as a hockey fan, because most of William Nylander's goals this season have come from in front of the net. He's one of the leaders in that category in the entire NHL, and as you can see here, this is very much not a perimeter player from where you could see his shots being taken. So make sure to like the video and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, remember, whether he's number 29 or number 88, William Nylander is number 1 in my heart, at least.